Ontario's Premier Doug Ford took center stage Monday as he proudly defended his controversial anti-tariff advertisement, one that, according to him, struck such a powerful chord that it rattled the White House and personally angered U.S. President Donald Trump. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. Ford claimed the television spot, which criticized Trump's trade tariffs by quoting former U.S. President Ronald Reagan, reached a global audience and forced a long overdue conversation about U.S.-Canada trade relations. Standing before reporters, Ford spoke with characteristic bravado, boasting that the ad had garnered over 1 billion impressions worldwide. "You know why President Trump is so upset right now?" he asked rhetorically. "It was because it was effective. It was working. It woke up the whole country." The ad, which aired during the first 2 games of the Baseball World Series, portrayed Trump's tariff policies as reckless and damaging to both Canadian and American workers. Using Reagan's own words against modern protectionism, it painted tariffs as an outdated and economically harmful tool, an argument that hit a sensitive nerve in Washington. Within days, Trump lashed out, announcing his plan to raise tariffs on Canadian goods by another 10% and abruptly halting ongoing trade discussions with Canada. Trump's reaction was swift and public. Speaking aboard Air Force One en route to Tokyo, he told reporters that the advertisement was a disgrace, and that Canadian officials had already apologized to him. "They said they were going to take the ad down, and they did, but they let it run for 2 more nights," Trump complained. The U.S. president made it clear he was not interested in resuming talks anytime soon, saying he had no plans to meet with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney for a while. Despite the tension, Ford appeared unapologetic. He admitted to pulling the ad only after the weekend games, insisting that it had already served its purpose. "It was the best ad I ever ran," Ford said. "It got the world's attention, and it achieved exactly what I wanted it to achieve." The ad, Ford explained, was not meant to embarrass the U.S. president but to awaken public consciousness about the dangers of tariffs and their potential to destroy jobs in both nations. "My intention was never to poke the president in the eye," Ford insisted. "My intention was to inform the American people that this is serious, and that it's going to cost jobs if we don't get a fair trade deal with our closest friend and ally." However, Trump saw it differently. He dismissed the distinction between provincial and federal governments, insisting that Canada's national leadership had full knowledge of the ad before its release. "Whether it's provincial or Canada itself, they all knew exactly what the ad was," Trump said. "The Prime Minister knew." For his part, Ford confirmed that Prime Minister Carney and his chief of staff had previewed the ad before it aired. Yet, Ford maintained that he acted independently, emphasizing that his government's top priority was to defend Ontario's workers and industries. "I'm not going to roll over," Ford declared. "My job is to protect auto jobs." While Trump announced his intention to impose the additional 10% tariff, Ford downplayed the threat, suggesting that the U.S. president often made bold statements that did not always materialize. "He's threatened a lot before," Ford said confidently. "He hasn't done it yet." The tension between Ford's populist conservative government and Carney's liberal administration added another layer of complexity to the unfolding trade drama. Though they belong to opposing political camps, both leaders share an interest in securing fair trade conditions with the United States. Earlier in the month, Carney had personally met Trump at the White House, hoping to strike a deal that would ease tariffs on critical sectors like steel, aluminum, and lumber, industries that form the backbone of Canada's economy and employ thousands across Ontario and Quebec. Those hopes were dashed after the advertisement aired. "We were close to an agreement," Carney admitted. "After that, the ads ran, and everything changed." The economic consequences of the dispute have been felt sharply across both sides of the border. Canada's manufacturing and resource sectors, already strained by years of fluctuating U.S. tariffs, now face further uncertainty. Auto manufacturers in Ontario, in particular, worry that a prolonged trade fight could drive up costs and threaten jobs. The United States remains Canada's largest trading partner, meaning any escalation could send shockwaves through industries deeply integrated between the two economies. Trump, meanwhile, has framed the controversy as a matter of national pride. He accused the ad's creators of misrepresenting the legacy of Ronald Reagan, a revered icon of the Republican Party, and using his words out of context. But historians have pointed out that Reagan, during his presidency, was indeed skeptical of tariffs, warning that they often hurt domestic consumers and workers more than they helped. The irony, critics noted, was that the very speech Reagan gave in 1987, used in the Ontario ad, had been a plea for free trade and open markets, principles Trump has repeatedly challenged with his protectionist stance. As Ford's ad campaign ignited an international political storm, the broader question of U.S.-Canada trade fairness once again dominated headlines. The United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, which replaced the original NAFTA under Trump's first term, was already due for review. Trump has since soured on aspects of that deal, claiming it benefits Canada more than the U.S., a sentiment echoed by some of his political allies but disputed by economists who argue that both sides have gained. Despite the uproar, Trump appeared determined to hold his ground. "We're happy with the deal we have now with Canada," he said. "We're going to let it ride." His tone suggested that, at least for now, the White House had no appetite for reconciliation. Ford, on the other hand, framed the entire episode as a victory for his province and for Canada's working class. He described the ad as a strategic move that forced the U.S. to confront uncomfortable truths about the real-world impact of tariffs. "It woke up America," Ford declared proudly. "It made people realize that unfair trade hurts everyone, not just Canadians." Yet, even as Ford celebrated his media triumph, he did not hide his frustration with what he sees as the silence of Republican leaders in the United States. "They are too scared of President Trump," he said bluntly. "When was the last time a Republican governor was afraid of a Republican president? They're scared of the ramifications, and that's really sad." As tensions simmer, both countries face growing economic pressure to find common ground. Carney has made clear that his door remains open, expressing hope that cooler heads will prevail. "Our relationship with the United States is too important to be defined by one ad," he said. "We remain ready to talk whenever they are." For now, though, the rift remains. What began as a single television advertisement has escalated into a full-blown diplomatic standoff, one that has left trade negotiations frozen, leaders on both sides pointing fingers, and industries caught in the crossfire. Doug Ford may consider it his best ad ever, but its political aftershocks are likely to reverberate far beyond Ontario's borders, shaping North America's trade future in ways no one fully anticipated. The tension between Canada and the United States had been simmering for weeks, but it erupted into full view when Ontario's Premier Doug Ford proudly declared that his controversial anti-tariff advertisement had achieved exactly what he intended. It had caught the attention of the entire world and, in his view, forced a conversation that the United States had long been avoiding. It was a moment of political theater, but also one of defiance. Ford, standing before a crowd of reporters and supporters, spoke with his trademark confidence, describing how the ad had reached over 1 billion impressions globally and how it had managed to rattle the highest office in Washington. He smiled as he said, "You know why President Trump is so upset right now? It was because it was effective. It was working. It woke up the whole country." His words carried the tone of a man who relished a fight, who saw himself as the voice of ordinary Canadians standing up to a global superpower that had grown too used to dictating the rules. The television advertisement, which aired during the first 2 games of the Baseball World Series, was anything but subtle. It criticized Donald Trump's decision to impose tariffs on Canadian goods, portraying the move as unfair and economically destructive. What made it especially provocative was its use of Ronald Reagan's own words, a clip from one of the former U.S. president's speeches in the 1980s in which Reagan had warned against the dangers of protectionism and tariffs. To Ford's team, it was a stroke of political genius, turning the revered figure of the Republican Party into a weapon against Trump's policies. To Trump, however, it was an act of public humiliation. He saw the ad as a direct challenge, not just from Canada, but from one of his supposed allies within the country's political landscape. Within hours of the ad airing, the U.S. president's anger became evident. Reports from Washington indicated that Trump was furious, calling his advisors and demanding an explanation. By the following day, he had announced that trade talks with Canada were suspended indefinitely and that he intended to raise tariffs on Canadian imports by an additional 10%. Aboard Air Force One, as he flew to Tokyo for a summit, Trump told reporters that the advertisement was a disgrace, and that it had already caused diplomatic fallout. "They shouldn't have done it," he said sharply. "And they've apologized. They said they were going to take the ad down. Well, they did, but they did it very late. They let it play for another 2 nights." He sounded less like a president discussing policy and more like a man personally offended, insulted on the global stage. For Ford, the ad's success was not measured by Trump's approval but by its impact.